Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. A major crisis unfolding in Ukraine as the possibility of full-scale war with Russia seems to grow with each passing hour. Vladimir Putin has already seized, in essence, two breakaway provinces in eastern Ukraine, in the Donbas region, and there's already been a large military deployment inside of the country to those regions, with many more troops stationed around Ukraine's borders. There could be an all-out war at any moment. Now, this is primarily, obviously, a problem for Russia and Ukraine, and this is something that European allies are watching very closely. The U.S. has a role to play, a diplomatic one, and so far it seems to have, on that front, failed. And yet, here we are in the midst of what is quickly turning into a political battle over Democrats who claim that somehow Joe Biden is doing a good job with all of this. If you're looking for foreign policy gravitas, Nancy Pelosi is certainly not a name that would come to mind quickly, but here she is trying to tell everybody out there that what Biden has managed so far on Ukraine has been outstanding.
We are very proud of our vice president our president whose leadership has been outstanding, and the message was delivered to the conference by the vice president. It was well received, it was unifying, it was firm in terms of how we would work together for sanctions should there be an invasion of Ukraine.
Outstanding leadership from Joe Biden that hasn't prevented the conflict from beginning and looks like it's going to escalate dramatically at any moment, putting forward a package of sanctions that no one really thinks is going to change the calculation for Russia and will largely just be something that agitates Putin and those who are supportive up to this point of what he's doing. Yeah, that's where we are right now. Doesn't look like it's going to change much of anything. But understand this, there will be ramifications for you, for the American people at home as a result of all of this. For example, Joe Biden, even yesterday, gave a speech during which he, at different points, seemed kind of like he was a little drowsy, a little bored, just running through the motions. Because what's the guy really going to do at this point? His administration's already in free fall. Biden did say that there would be consequences of defending freedom. Watch.
As we respond, my administration is using every tool at our disposal to protect American businesses and consumers from rising prices at the pump. As I said last week, defending freedom will have cost for us as well and here at home. We need to be honest about that. But as we do this, I'm going to take robust action to make sure the pain of our sanctions is targeted at the Russian economy, not ours.
Targeting the Russian economy and not ours. Meanwhile, there's already a lot of economic challenges that the Biden administration has failed to meet. And this is likely to make it all somewhat worse because there'll be a shock in oil prices if full-scale war breaks out. The Russians are already turning toward China for a means of evading sanctions to the degree that they can. And there'll be all kinds of implications for stock markets, for energy prices. And so this is an opportunity, I guess, for propaganda from Democrats. I know that seems counterintuitive, but CBS News put this out. The U.S. economy has been hit with increased gas prices, inflation, and supply chain issues due to the Ukraine crisis. Let's understand this for a moment, friends. The reality here is that hasn't really hit yet. It may hit. What we've seen up to this point has been a lot of ineptitude and stupidity from Biden and his top foreign policy people, but by no means has the Ukraine crisis been the cause of all of this. No, it's been before that. All these things were happening before that. And so there's going to be a lot of attempts out there to try to find ways to tell everybody that this is not Biden's fault. He's doing a great job. It's not Biden's fault. Also blame the economy. And by the way, if things get really ugly, the next move will be for them to say that this is the fault of, you guessed it, not even Vladimir Putin so much, Donald Trump, person that scares them and that they hate more than anybody else. Here is a tweet from MSNBC from the Maddow blog. Why didn't Russia invade Ukraine during Trump's term? Perhaps because Putin was so pleased to see Trump pursuing goals in line with Moscow's agenda. That's right. The way logic works, if you're a leftist now, is no invasion of Ukraine. That doesn't mean the guy in charge was doing a good job. He was actually doing such a pro-Russian job that they didn't want to invade Ukraine, which is a totally separate issue. But what the heck are they talking about? It doesn't make any sense. Russia collusion was really a stage of Trump derangement syndrome, but that Trump derangement syndrome continues on to this day. Which then brings me to yesterday's interview with Donald Trump, which made a lot of headlines in the news here at home and around the world. I sat down with former President Trump along with Clay Travis, my co-host on the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton show, and we talked to Donald Trump about a whole range of issues. What's going to happen in Ukraine? What's the situation with China? What about our southern border? We touched on a lot of things. Certainly news was made, but the issue that they focused in on, that the media focused in on, was they said that Donald Trump called Putin a genius. Now, he said that the move he made was genius in the context of also pointing out that it never would have happened while Trump was president because he wouldn't have allowed it because he doesn't want it. But somehow saying that Putin made a genius move while Biden is a bumbling buffoon is taken as evidence. This is the way they view things. That's taken as evidence of some kind of support for what Putin is doing. This is just nonsense. Here is actually what Trump said. Here's the whole clip. Listen.
Well, what went wrong was a rigged election. And what went wrong is a candidate that shouldn't be there and a man that has no concept of what he's doing. I went in yesterday and there was a television screen and I said, this is genius. Putin declares a big portion of the Ukraine. Putin declares it as independent. Oh, that's wonderful. So Putin is now saying it's independent, a large section of Ukraine. I said, how smart is that? And he's going to go in and be a peacekeeper. That's the strongest peace force. We could use that on our southern border. That's the strongest peace force I've ever seen. There were more army tanks than I've ever seen. They're going to keep peace all right. No, but think of it. Here's a guy who's very savvy. I know him very well, very, very well. By the way, this never would have happened with us. Had I been in office, not even thinkable. This would never have happened. But here's a guy that says, I'm going to declare a big portion of Ukraine independent. He used the word independent. And we're going to go out and we're going to go in and we're going to help keep peace. You got to say that's pretty savvy. And you know what the response was from Biden? There was no response.
He's assessing the tactics that Putin, a strongman, a thug, a tyrant, is using here. And that should be pretty clear when you look at the actual context, because he also says it would never happen while Trump was president. So he clearly does not support this, but the media went crazy with, oh my gosh, Trump is supporting Putin. They'll say all kinds of stuff. They were saying that for 4 years when there was no basis for it, but they keep saying it to this day. Here's Joe Scarborough. Who does he vote for? Who does he believe in? What does he support? This guy, well, he supports whatever the biggest check from MSNBC supports. That's all that really matters to him. But here he is saying that, well, Trump was praising Putin, and that's basically treason. Watch.
I think it's really important to emphasize that this sort of trope in American politics coming from the far right, also parts of the far left, only feed into Moscow's grand strategy here.
And I'm so glad you used the word useful idiot. That's what we conservatives called people on the far left throughout the Cold War that were constantly apologizing for Soviet leaders. You can take it all the way back into the 40s and the 50s who were constantly apologizing for Joseph Stalin. We now have useful idiots on the Trump right that are apologizing for Vladimir Putin. The term fits them tightly, like a glove, Mika.
No one's apologizing for Putin, and Scarborough and those like him aren't useful idiots. They're just idiots. Pretty straightforward, really. What are we going to do about the energy price shock that could come from all this? Well, the Biden administration certainly doesn't have a good handle on energy production and doesn't want to do a whole lot of it for climate change reasons. We'll talk to Tiana Lowe of the Washington Examiner on this issue coming up in just a moment. A lot of companies promise that your privacy is guaranteed, but we know that's not true. That's why you need a new privacy and cybersecurity application tool called Secure, spelled S-E-K-U-R. Secure uses proprietary encryption and is offering secure instant messaging and email. With Secure, all of your communication is based on servers and data centers hosted in Switzerland. Big tech can't spy on you. We know privacy is a big issue these days. Secure will never mine your data, never ask for your phone number. They're all about protecting your privacy online. They are your solution to stop the constant theft of your digital identity. Secure only costs $5 for the Messenger, $10 for the Messenger and email combination package. Go to secure.com and take back your privacy today. That's SEKUR.com and use promo code BUCK for 25% off.
We're closely monitoring energy supplies for any disruption. We're executing a plan in coordination with major oil-producing consumers and producers toward a collective investment to secure stability in global energy supplies. This will blunt gas prices. I want to limit the pain the American people are feeling at the gas pump. This is critical to me.
Old man Biden thinks that he has a plan to deal with skyrocketing gas prices. Does anyone think that that's going to turn out well? Let's just go through some recent history here. Initially, they told us inflation was transitory, then it wasn't. They said that gas prices would come down, then they didn't. And now we're on the precipice of what could be a major war between Russia and Ukraine that will certainly have an effect on gas prices, especially as various sanctions kick in. So what's really going to happen here? Tiana Lowe joins us now. She's a commentary writer at the Washington Examiner and a savvy lady on these and many other matters. Tina, good to have you with us.
Hey, Buck.
We'll take a hey, Buck. So you wrote in your piece, Biden has attempted to reduce domestic oil drilling while doing nothing to reduce our need for domestic oil supply. He killed the Keystone XL pipeline, spooked domestic production with shifting standards and regulatory promises he's since reneged on, and refused to extend further drilling permits. Across the pond, he defied the pleas of our Ukrainian allies to cower to Germany and allowed Russia to construct its Nord Stream 2 pipeline, reversing our sanctions on a project designed specifically to reconsolidate the global oil market into an OPEC-controlled cartel. The result, not just rising prices stateside, but also an increasing reliance on oil from a top adversary. Tina, this does not sound like a record of success on the issue of gas prices. What's going on here?
No, so one of the main things that I've seen a lot of the corporate media and Democrats try and do is blame this on some sort of demand spike because of COVID. No, there was a huge demand, retraction in May of 2020 when oil futures went negative. But demand had returned, by the end of 2020. We were close to already the oil consumption that we had been using pre-COVID. So no, the oil prices did not explode for the first year of Biden's presidency just because of a restoration of demand. It was because of what Biden did to the supply. So obviously, Keystone XL pipeline is one of the big ones. But the real thing, and the thing that he has the most power over, and that's what's being fought in right now in the Supreme Court, is him terminating these oil drilling permits on federal land. That's where a lot of the supply is being constricted. And because he keeps on going forward and then two steps back on what sort of regulations he's going to impose, and ironically enough, it has made us so much more dependent on foreign oil. In 2021, the EIA, which is the government's official record for petroleum imports and petroleum use and petroleum purchases, the last month they have is November of 2021. So with just 11 months of 2021, we recorded more Russian oil imports by the gallon than any other year on record. And this record goes back to the 90s. So right now, Russian oil is 7% of all of our oil imports. And Biden's saying that us now, whatever we're doing in Ukraine isn't going to affect oil prices. No. So already oil prices are up nearly 50% since the beginning of Biden's presidency. It's only going to get worse because we have been made more dependent on foreign oil and specifically on Russian oil. That is not what strength looks like. And that is not what, good diplomacy looks like. We did not isolate Russia economically. And if anything, we took the commodity that working class Americans rely on the most, oil, and made ourselves uniquely dependent on Russia for it.
Here's a little flashback, Tina, to last year when Secretary of Energy, and it's remarkable, having sat next to this woman on the panel on the Bill Maher show and heard some of the things she said. The fact that she's a cabinet level official now is stunning. But Secretary Granholm laughed at the idea of boosting domestic oil production. Watch this one.
In Sturgis, Michigan, it is $2.89 a gallon. I guess that's better than in California. What is the Granholm plan to increase oil production in America?
Oh my God, that is hilarious. Would that I had the magic wand on this. As you know, of course, oil is a global market. It is controlled by a cartel. That cartel is called OPEC, and they made a decision yesterday that they were not going to increase beyond what they were already planning.
Oh, so it's OPEC's fault and there's nothing America can do. That's good to know.
It's the seething contempt that really gets me, not just the stupidity, but the fact that she can just laugh at, parents who are going to have to rebudget what they feed their children, because we all know that increases on gas prices, be it a gas tax or just prices increasing at the pump, that is always, always regressive. It always disproportionately impacts the working class. And the issue is she doesn't even seem to understand the way the oil market actually works. OPEC, which is now OPEC plus, not just OPEC, because it involves other allies who weren't a part of the original OPEC of the 70s. They try to be a cartel, but that doesn't work when you have other free countries like America, say, trying to create a pipeline with Canada to help more free-flowing oil. She is letting a cartel turn this oligopoly into something that acts like a monopoly, where those who are producing the supply are allowed to set the prices. We don't have to do that. When there are more suppliers in the market, you can't have the suppliers setting prices. That's where supply and demand kick in. But because Biden has elected to give more market concentration to OPEC plus, which does include Russia and included Russia when he entered this presidency, it means that he has chosen to have some of our worst adversaries be the ones controlling our wallet. So no, you don't need a magic wand. You just need more supply, and we know how to get it. We know we need more fracking. We know, to the very, very, very limited credit, and just in the interest of me being fair, the bipartisan infrastructure bill does allocate $6 billion to keep nuclear power plants in operation. But what does that matter when top Democrats like Gavin Newsom and Andrew Cuomo are bending over backwards to try and shut down all of their nuclear power plant facilities? So it's the Democratic message right now in terms of how they want to solve climate change and initiate world peace is to just immediately overnight hamper American oil consumption, which is not a solution. All it will wreak is devastation in the market, because people still need gas in cars, people still need electricity, people still need petroleum. You cannot do this overnight, but it is clear that this does fit into this larger climate agenda of just changing consumer behavior with punitive prices.
Tiana, good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Buck.
Coming next, Gordon Chang is going to be talking to us about the realities of China post the Olympics. What's it going to do given the situation in Russia and Ukraine? We'll be into that in just a few moments. The world's eyes are turned to Ukraine right now, as a major escalation from Russia could happen at any moment. This could be a large-scale war in Europe, bringing to bear advanced munitions. There could be high casualties and could create a mess, not just for Europe and the periphery of Russia, but around the world. There are other players that are also already involved in this in ways large and small. One of them is certainly China. Well, who can we talk to about that? Our friend Gordon Chang, author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War and The Coming Collapse of China. Go check out his Twitter handle. Gordon G. Chang is where you go for that. Gordon, thanks so much.
Thank you, Buck.
So I sat down with President Trump yesterday, former President Trump, 45, in Mar-a-Lago, and we asked him about this because there's so much attention right now, Gordon, on Ukraine specifically, understandably so. But we did want to ask, well, what about China as a possible next move here, as there's this massive destabilization going on in Europe? Here's what the former president said.
By the way, China's going to be next. You know, China's going to.
You think they're going to go after Taiwan?
Oh, absolutely. Not with me, they wouldn't have.
But you think with Biden they'll try him?
They're waiting till after the Olympics. Now the Olympics ended, and look at your stopwatch, right? No, he wants that just like it's almost like twin sisters right here, because you have one that wants Taiwan. I think equally badly. Somebody said, "Who wants it more?" I think probably equally badly, but. No, Putin would have never done it, and she would have never done it. And also, North Korea has not acted up for 4 years.
What do you make of that analysis from President Trump?
I think President Trump was exactly right. Whatever one might say about Trump policy, both China and Russia were very concerned about him. They knew that he was unpredictable, and Trump deterred them. What we have right now, though, is China and Russia together because they don't fear Biden. And we have China effectively financing Putin's misadventures in Eastern Europe because of these commodity deals. The $117.5 billion of oil and gas arrangements that were announced on February 4, plus a couple days ago, they announced 100 million metric tons of coal that Russia is going to sell China. So clearly, China is financing aggression in Europe.
Gordon, there was a Fox News article today that the Chinese media accidentally posted Chinese Communist Party rules on Russia-Ukraine coverage. Some are saying it hinted a bit at a possible Taiwan takeover move in the future. They said China will also need Russia's understanding and support when wrestling with America to solve the Taiwan issue once and for all. And it doesn't hurt to use moderately pro-Russia language. What did you make of this piece? This seemed to be raising a lot of eyebrows.
Well, clearly, Beijing is supporting Putin. You hear in the U.S. media that a lot of middle to low level Chinese officials are concerned about Putin. They worry that he's doing things that undermine Chinese interests. And yes, those reports are true, but they don't really matter, because at the top of the political system where it counts, they're supporting Putin for various reasons. And so we've got to assume that we're dealing with China and Russia that are coordinating extremely closely, that are working together, and we need to take them at their word. Their very long February 4 communique, which is a warning to the world, said that, look, these two countries have a no limits partnership. And that means that President Trump was absolutely right. Call them twin sisters, call them whatever you want, but they are now working together against the United States and against the world.
How do you see the relationship between Russia and China possibly growing and closer coordination being a result of the crisis right now with Ukraine?
I think that the crisis will drive the two together. And the reason is that China sees the U.S. as its mortal enemy. It believes it's in an existential struggle. It has defined the U.S. in ways which make it very difficult for China to cooperate with the U.S. And although these mid-level to lower Chinese officials, they are worried that Putin can do something that can end up hurting China. Nonetheless, I think Xi Jinping sees an opportunity. He sees an opportunity for, among other reasons, that the world is focusing on Russia, which means it's not focusing on China. This is sort of like the play of what happened after 9/11, where George W. Bush was thinking of a vigorous China policy, but dropped it because he saw a bigger enemy, obviously Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden. So I think that China is sort of seeing the same thing play out again. And this time the villain is Putin. And again, China feels it can get away with murder, literally and figuratively.
In a Washington Post article, they were writing about how China keeps walking its tightrope between Russia and the West as tensions flare in Ukraine. And China media outlets describe the crisis as escalating under American provocation. Horizon News, a social media account under Beijing News, appeared to accidentally post instructions on Ukraine coverage to its Weibo account. The message, later deleted, said that no posts unfavorable to Russia or with pro-Western content should be published. Look, it's not news to anybody, Gordon, that Chinese media, state media, is going to be taking a propaganda approach to this. But it does seem interesting, I think, to a lot of folks, how much the Chinese Communist Party is watching events in Russia and trying to get a sense of what is the world reaction to this and what might the world's reaction be if we decide to take a piece of territory that isn't ours.
Yeah. This is just confirmation that the top of the Chinese political system has given a propaganda directive that must be followed by all media in China. And it's just a real indication where Beijing is. When you look at this, I think that China also understands it needs Russian support when China goes after one of its neighbors. And we always talk about Taiwan, but it could very well be India, could be the Philippines, or maybe even Japan. China is going after all of its neighbors to its south and to its east. And clearly it wants Russia's backing. And that's why the two of them are so closely together. They're coordinating their foreign policies. And by the way, last August, the Russian soldiers were using Chinese weapons for the first time, showing that they're really moving towards interoperability. That means one military composed of Chinese and Russians arrayed against us.
How much can the Chinese Communist Party help Russia not just evade sanctions, but effectively make sanctions a somewhat meaningless tool in the Ukraine crisis?
Well, there are two ways. Of course, there are the commodity deals that we just talked about. Plus, also, China can say, well, look, you're going to get hit with dollar sanctions, Russia. Why don't we do our transactions in another currency? So, for instance, the Chinese renminbi. Now, there are a lot of reasons why the renminbi is not a good substitute for the dollar. But in an emergency situation, the Chinese banking system can be a stopgap for Russia, which can help out in an emergency situation. So Beijing is really all in on this. And that's why I think that we need to see these two bad actors working together. And by the way, Buck, it's not just China and Russia we need to be worried about. We need to be worried about their proxies, North Korea, Iran, Pakistan, maybe even Algeria. So therefore, it's a coalition arrayed against us.
Gordon Chang, everybody, go check out his Twitter at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, Buck.
Coming up, there are some law enforcement officials at a senior level calling for the resignation of DHS Chief Mayorkas over the continued disaster at the border. We'll talk to the Montana State Attorney General about his call for just that coming up. 100% of the equity in your home can be stolen by cyber criminals, and once it's gone, years of hard work and savings are wiped out in an instant. The FBI calls home title fraud one of the fastest growing crimes, which is why you need to go to HomeTitleLock.com, America's leader in home title protection. Here's the problem. The deed to your home is the only document that really proves you own it, and the deeds to all our homes are online now. In minutes, a criminal can forge your name off the deed to your home and refile as the new owner. Like one new homeowner who spent a fortune in legal fees when a thief forged himself onto the deed to his home and then took out loans against it. You need Home Title Lock. Home Title Lock is your peace of mind when it comes to the deed to your home, making sure that it's protected. Go to HomeTitleLock.com right now to go check this out. HomeTitleLock.com to protect the deed to your home online. During my interview yesterday with former President Trump, I asked him about the border situation, and he said that it is awful, which is obvious from the numbers, and he agreed that it's probably going to be even worse this year. Lawlessness that the Biden administration seems to encourage both in word and deed. So what exactly can be done about this? Well, one way to take action would be to at least get some of those who have been either complicit or directing the de facto open borders policies to step down from their roles. DHS Secretary Mayorkas would be certainly a person that comes to mind when we're dealing with that issue. We have a number of state attorney generals who have called for the head of DHS to resign. Among them is Attorney General Austin Knudsen of Montana. Sir, good to have you with us.
Glad to be here, Buck. Thanks for having me.
So we have Republican attorneys general calling for DHS Chief Mayorkas to resign of the border disaster. Here's from the letter they put out. You have admitted to making Border Patrol agent jobs more difficult, yet do nothing to ameliorate the problem. Instead, you make it exponentially harder for agents to do their job by implementing Biden administration directives that go against their congressionally mandated responsibilities. That seems pretty apparent right now. I want to know, as a law enforcement official, what do you think of when you see that the DHS chief wants to make it harder for Border Patrol to do their jobs?
Well, it's horrifying. I get asked fairly often, why does a northern tier state like Montana care about what's going on the southern border? But Buck, I can tell you, we're dealing with a huge crime increase. We're dealing with a huge illegal drug problem in Montana, and the two of them are completely intertwined. So this is absolutely affecting us here in Montana. We're also a border state. We've got a lot of Customs and Border Patrol agents here in Montana. They oftentimes get shifted down to the southern border and do work down there. And I talk to those guys. I talk to those agents. Morale is at a real low point in Customs and Border Patrol because they're literally being ordered to stand down and ignore federal law. And when we're just flinging the door wide open and letting people cross the southern border with impunity, bringing God knows what with them, we shouldn't be surprised that we're seeing these kind of crime increases and drug increases all across the country.
The Republican attorneys general have also pointed out that there was the suspension and cancellation of border barrier construction, which has further exacerbated the crisis and is yet another strategy you have reversed course on. We have seen no change in this. There's no national security if our border is wide open. There's no production of barrier going on. When you speak to folks about, you just mentioned you've got Border Patrol in your state, you are a border state, a different border. When you ask, or when this issue comes up of the cessation of building some kind of barrier, fence, or wall at our southern border, what are those agents tasked with trying to secure the border say about this? It feels like their job is intentionally being made harder to outsiders who are watching what the Biden administration is doing.
Well, you've got a couple things that happen there. I mean, you've got law enforcement professionals in Border Patrol. These are truly our law enforcement folks that want to protect their country, and they're being ordered instead to be a glorified Ellis Island. So I mean, that's horrible for morale. But I'll tell you, Buck, I was just down the southern border about 3 weeks ago with several state AGs. General Ken Paxton from Texas had us all down there. I saw this with my own eyes. I saw sections of the wall that had been built under President Trump, and you could literally see where they stopped and just piled up all the steel that is now just sitting there, rusting and literally rotting. And you've got these huge gaps in the fence. Now, the state of Texas has stepped in. They've appropriated their own huge amounts of money, and they're constructing sections of the wall to try to get a handle on this. But you've still got these tremendous gaps in these high pressure, high crossing areas. They're very dangerous. We were down there. It was starting to get dark, and we had the local Texas Highway Patrol try to get us out of there because things were going to start picking up. And that just tells you the kind of problems they're dealing with down there in Texas. And that was just in one small area down by McAllen. I mean, you multiply that by the huge amount of border that state has to deal with. You start looking at the other border states. This is a huge problem, and the Biden administration just doesn't seem to care. I mean, deportations are down 70%, Buck, just in this last year alone. I mean, in 1 year of Joe Biden, we went from deporting almost 270,000 people per year to this last year, it was just over 50,000. And again, 70% decrease. I think this is just indicative of how little the Biden administration cares about what's going on in flyover country, about the drug problem, about the crime problem that's coming with it. And, a wall would absolutely help. Are we going to stop it all? No. But we can certainly slow things down there for sure.
DHS recorded, this is also from the note written by the letter demanding resignation of Mayorkas as DHS chief. DHS recorded more than 2 million encounters with illegal immigrants at the southern border last fiscal year, exceeding previous records and bringing with it soaring numbers of drug seizures and criminal activity. In abandoning any semblance of transparency and prioritizing illegal immigrants over American citizens, you and DHS have failed our nation and our people. I mean, look, I appreciate that these senior state level Republican law enforcement these attorneys general are putting this out there. I mean, do you think that this might come to a point where there's so much political pressure on the administration that you could even see a resignation and replacement of the head of DHS?
I hope so. Frankly, I don't hold out a lot of hope for it. I think they're all pretty entrenched. I don't think Secretary Mayorkas is probably looking to go anywhere. I will tell you, we were supposed to get a briefing from DHS when we were all down in Texas 3 weeks ago. At the last minute, the 11th hour, the night before, Mayorkas called them and ordered Department of Homeland Security in Texas not to brief us. He then turned around and he flew in that very next night when we were all there, and gave a quick impromptu rah-rah to the Customs and Border Patrol agents, and then turned around and left. The idea here is to just put some pressure on the administration and get some of this data out. This fentanyl problem is just tremendous, Buck. I can't overstate this. Texas seized enough fentanyl last year to kill every man, woman, and child in America 6 times over. This fentanyl is increasingly becoming the problem we're dealing with. Even here in Montana, we just busted a guy a couple nights ago that had almost 10,000 pills of fentanyl in his possession here in Montana. We are dealing with this. We're dealing with the overdoses. This stuff is staggering. The number one cause of death in America for adults ages 18 to 45, it's not COVID, it's not heart disease, it's not even car accidents. It's fentanyl overdose. That's what you are most likely to die from if you're 18 to 45. That's stunning.
It is absolutely stunning, and it's a true national crisis. You mentioned, Mr. Attorney General, the DHS chief visiting and speaking about Border Patrol. Here's what that sounded like. Watch.
I really appreciated the openness with which the agents expressed their views. A couple guys might have expressed them what I thought was unprofessionally, which was surprising to me because it's something I've never seen in the Border Patrol in my, 8 years of exposure, person-to-person exposure. But the substance of what was communicated really called for action, and we're jumping on it, but we've got a lot of work to do.
I mean, maybe they're tired of the bullcrap, Mr. Attorney General.
I mean, nothing about that statement is surprising, Buck. I have no doubt he's never heard sentiments like that in Washington, D.C. I can tell you, if you actually get out in the field and talk to Customs and Border Patrol agents who are actually doing their job, who care about their communities and care about their country, they are incredibly frustrated. I know a lot of them are scared to speak up. They're no different than any other employee. They're trying to hang on to their jobs, but they're also patriots. That's what I've been most impressed about Customs and Border Patrol agents. These truly are law enforcement professionals who are trying to do the right thing, and they feel stymied. And this is going to bite us in the rear end. We're going to lose a lot of great law enforcement professionals in that federal agency, and this is just going to make us even more vulnerable. But I wish I could say I was surprised by the Secretary's comments.
Attorney General Knudsen, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it, sir.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Coming up, we'll have a lighter moment here as a mom, a proud mom, has a funny and you'll see, a good moment on camera coming up here. Next. Quick hits time, everybody. We've got a lot to talk about today in the quick hits world, so let's jump right into it. Stories that I want to talk to you about, but we hadn't had a chance to dive into before. Just things I think you should see before you end your evening or your day. Here's a guy in California who's showing off government-sponsored safe drug use kit, which includes needle, crack pipe, and meth pipe too. Watch.
So every Tuesday and Friday in Hollywood, they have a Catholic church that gives this stuff out. This is what we living at, y'all, and this is what the government's doing. Joe Biden said he spent $60 million on paraphernalia for drugs, and this is what it looks like. It says being alive. This is a meth pipe. Yep. Right here with this bubble thing. I guess you put the meth in there. This is a crack pipe. Yep. Okay. These are all instructions on how to overdose treatment and education. This is the needle in here. I'm not going to open this. I'm scared.
That's for heroin?
Yes, for heroin. It has the alcohol pads and stuff.
Needle?
It's a needle in there.
Oh my God.
And these things are like a black and mild filter that you put on the crack pipe so you don't think no one's saliva, so you don't get sick.
Tens of millions of dollars spent on giving people more implements to use for illegal drugs. And this coming at a time when we had the most overdoses in our history last year. Over 100,000 people died of drug overdoses in America. It's the leading cause of death for people in the early stage of their life, young adults in this country at this point. So the Biden administration wants to make it easier for people to do those drugs. Does not seem like a good plan. In the midst of the Ukraine crisis, you have to be very careful for what could be propaganda, people trying to push an agenda, maybe even fabricating news stories or situations. Here's one that my production crew flagged and said, hold on a second. You have Russian TV journalists who claim they are being shelled by Ukraine. Watch this one.
Жители покинули свои дома еще в 2014 году, когда... Тихо, тихо, тихо. Что такое?
Ложись, ложись.
Слышно, слышно.
That, Team here thought that was suspicious. So got to keep an eye out for things that don't really look like they add up. National Guard is being activated for the U.S. trucker convoy. That's right. There's an American trucker convoy that is going to be making its way from the West Coast to Washington, D.C. This is a tweet from Breitbart's Christina Wong, and she's told that Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin just approved an order to stand up the D.C. National Guard in response to the upcoming trucker convoy, and told other states will also provide troops to support the mission. This will be fascinating if this is anything like what we saw in Canada. Now, keep in mind, Democrats in this country overwhelmingly supported the breaking of the Canadian trucker convoy by force. Trudeau sent in the police. They dragged people out of their trucks. They arrested them, threw them on the pavement. Some were trampled by horses, and apparently members of the Ottawa Police Department thought that was funny. So the libs in this country are fine with being authoritarian and acting tyrannical or having others act like tyrants on their behalf. We'll see how that plays out if, in fact, there's a trucker convoy that makes it all the way to our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. And then there's just sometimes a video you see that's kind of fun, gives you a moment to relax and kind of smile, laugh. This is a young man who's doing, reporter Miles Harris, who is doing a live hit, something I've done many times before. Here he is out on the street, and guess who pulls up in a car while he's doing his live hit? Watch.
This is my mom. Hold on. I'm trying to work right now. You over there calling my phone. This is D'Angelo. You can say hi. And don't be holding up traffic because you got cars behind you. Did you record?
It can happen to anybody. Mom pulls up, you know, you're doing your job. It's kind of fun. Nice moment there. That's it for tonight's Hold the Line. The No Spin News of Bill O'Reilly is up next. Bill Tye.